Welcome back to the PFC Podcast. The views and opinions you are about to hear are the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of anyone else. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome back to the PFC Podcast. This is Dennis, and today I'm with Noel. How are you doing today?
Great, man. Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate you jumping on. Legend of the Navy SEAL community. Well, small part of it, but I listened to your talk at SOMSA this year about considerations of maritime irregular warfare, and they really didn't give you that big of a time slot. So I thought I asked you to come on, and I tricked you, I guess, because you did. If we can expand more on that, because it's probably a great big topic that people are mulling over, but not actually moving forward.
Yeah, and I was remiss before, so thanks for having me on, Dennis. And again, thanks for all you do. I think this podcast is a really, really good thing for the next generation. And it's this storytelling and sharing of knowledge, and it's a really perfect way to help the next generation and to capture some of our thoughts and thought processes. So I appreciate everything you do. I also shout out to SOMA for creating a great venue where you can come. I personally had several of the speeches that were given at SOMA help me out in my operational career greatly, and I was very thankful for them. So every time that I get to, in the small way, contribute back to that organization, I appreciate it. And I started with my talk at SOMA being like, this is a really hard problem. It's going to be a hard problem. And I feel like we need to put some more thought and really horsepower towards it, especially as I was preparing for the speeches. There was a lot of my own personal experience that I was thinking about. But then I did a very, very big deep dive into reading and historics and trying to research all the way down to like POW medicine in World War II camps. There's a great book, For the Boys, an Australian doctor who talks about, using charcoal to treat intestinal parasites, setting up patient-to-patient blood transfusion with mason jars and inflation needles, right? Just so much great historical knowledge on some of these challenges. And then in my talk, the Shetland bus, the Norwegian kind of guerrilla flotilla, if you will, from World War II. Norway, most coastline of any country in the world. Maybe we should look at what they did during World War II and how they created some operational capability and flexibility in a real irregular warfare way with the Shetland bus. Back to Dr. Defoe in the parachute ward, jumping into Yugoslavia. Lots of great historical knowledge out there that I think is really not just worth, you would be remiss if you don't do a deep dive into it and not only read it, but read between the lines of what their thought processes and thinking was. So I appreciated this. I had a really great time building this presentation and sitting down and think about it. So I appreciate the chance to talk about it more.
Pleasure is definitely mine. So, I think before you really get into how do you fix it, you really have to know the problem. And I am not going into the ocean. So if you could, what challenges make maritime versus any other kind of irregular warfare different?
Yeah. So we talked about it a little bit before, right? As we were getting warmed up here, and I'm trying to be concise in my thoughts. It is the operational unpredictability of the environment. It is since the beginning of time, the nature of the ocean. Everything about the ocean lends to unpredictability. The fact that we have charts, we have tide tables, and on any given day, the ocean is going to decide not to follow those. It's going to tell you that, mean high tide is going to be at this time, and then it's not going to be. And it sometimes happens. It is the immensity of dealing with the ocean and all of the different challenges from pressure. We talked about waves coming over and how that changes the pressure, to temperature, to salinity, to buoyancy, currents. They're all going to change. It's going to change with you all the time. The corrosive nature of seawater, just itself being so corrosive against gear, the tiny little things like that add to operational unpredictability and challenges. The nature of a coastline, right? A coastline gives a natural channeling. Like, we're not just trying to go out and go spearfishing. We have to do this with an adversary trying to catch us and trying to actively interdict the operations that we want to accomplish. And it gives them a natural channeling point and gives them the operational upper hand at every point. They have the time to set up. They have the time to adjust their environment to what they need. They have the time to place sensors because they know where we're going to come. We have to come over the coastline at one point. So it gives the enemy the upper hand and the operational inflexibility. We could talk about all the little esoteric details, but I think those are my two main points of what create the problems in this environment.
And I mean, all those just blatantly make sense. People like fishermen, like just people who work in that environment, like the ocean, it seems very unpredictable, but it seems like predictably unpredictable, if that makes any sense. Like if you have somebody who makes a living in that environment, they have enough experience dealing with the unpredictability of it that they still know what to do in order to do whatever it is that they need to do. So, I mean, that can't be the only part, or the only part of it.
Yeah, it just takes some time to build that. I wish I had the quote right in front of me, but Chesty Sullenberger, the guy who saved that flight that went into the river, right? He has this great quote about, he's like, I think it's training and experience or just credit you put in the bank until the day you need to withdraw it. Something along those lines. And I think it's a fantastic quote, and it's a great way to think about it. It takes time and effort to build that experience. Like the famous quote, the cowboy didn't put the bow in his legs for no reason, right? Like, it just takes some time, right? And it's difficult to build that experience. It's difficult to teach that, and it's difficult to plan that in a way that can be turned over quickly. Like, you got to take, and every coastline's different. Every ocean's different. I'm sure that guys that operate in the Med probably don't have the same experiential learning that the guys that are operating the Baltics do, right? It's just something different. I think that's the big challenge, is how do you get all that time and specifically operational environment and that daily knowledge of understanding how to adapt to the environment. How do you get that built into a U.S. military structure where you're on a 2-year rotational cycle, right? Or a 6-month deployment cycle? Like, I think about it all the time is, I've said this my entire career, your deployment is only as good as your turnover binder. It doesn't really matter how much great you did in your 6 months or your 8 months, your 10 months, your 12 months. Where you really, and I learned this from a really fantastic senior enlisted guy, is what are you setting the next guy up with? That's just as important as what you did while you're here, right? So how do I take these maritime challenges and build them into a turnover binder that everybody, takes all this knowledge right away? It's hard. I think there's a way around it. It's just going to take the effort, and the effort is what I think the barrier to entry is. Getting out there, getting the training time, the training dollars.
And I absolutely agree. I see it all the time. And it's not one unit, it's like literally the entire enterprise. It's difficult to get the time to train. It's difficult to get the facilities to train, et cetera, et cetera. All the excuses, right? Instead, like it sounds like the perfect answer would be, well, let's build something. Let's build something that will negate the inexperience of the person, and we'll just kind of skip over that bad part with some kind of technology, right? And in some ways, they're not wrong. You look at Ukraine; they don't even have a navy, and they've humiliated the Russian Navy multiple times, right? So why can't we just build a thing?
I honestly think that's a great point, and I do think there's space for that. There is always 100% some space for innovation, and I think the Ukraine's done it really well. The only retort I would have to that is, yes, the Ukraine has innovated very well, but at what cost?
Right? What do you mean, cost monetarily, or?
I would say in human life, because they were building the plane as they were flying it at all times. And my challenge would say, yes, I want technology innovation, and I want technology innovation to lower the friction of combat. But I want to do it in a way that I'm not figuring it out during the first 6 months of a conflict. I want that figured out before the 6 months of the conflict, so that I am saving a ton of human capital, morale, right? There's a Napoleon quote about how important morale is. It's like 3 times more important than logistics. Or I was just rereading Once an Eagle, and he talks about it. But right, I think we forget about this in medicine all the time, especially special operations medicine. It's a morale thing. I've seen it before when I show up. I've showed up on a deployment and had a good enough reputation that guys are like, fuck yeah, Noel's here now. And he's going to build a fucking great medevac plan, and he's going to do all this stuff, and this makes it so much better. Yeah. Right? And I had to be like, guys, I love your confidence in me. We're in the middle of nowhere. Please, if you're on a ladder, have somebody hold it. If you're messing with the generator, don't be wearing flip-flops standing in water.
Don't smoke.
Come on, guys. So I think there's that morale building that if we were to approach this innovation in a way where we're not buying down risk with just innovation that isn't focused, properly tested, or integrated, we could have exponentially better results during the first part of the conflict, and allow us to innovate at a speed that is even greater because we came in prepared. Like if we came in with a playbook, we could call better audibles.
And I think that's part of why Ukraine, they've innovated so fast. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice.
Necessity is the mother of all invention.
People are dying, and that lends importance to whatever change that you need to accomplish, right? If one better, I think, could be like if you actually practiced the thing and then took the lessons learned from that and then informed whatever technology company that you're talking to, or all of, God forbid, all of the technology companies that you use, so that they're more informed on what people actually need.
Yeah, I think illuminating the gaps, right? And that's what training and iteration can do in a way that nothing else can. To get out and actually do the thing, you really then will illuminate your gaps of what the problems are. Is it a subsurface vehicle in the littoral zone? Honestly, I've been involved with this back and forth. Yes, a subsurface vehicle in the littoral zone in paper sounds fantastic. I would not be willing to say that it's the answer until it was tested in a very realistic scenario and not in a pool or a wave. You know, even some of the great facilities we have for like the sonar boom testings at some of the research facilities the Navy has, I don't think it's the same as being tested not just in the environment, but integrated into an operational exercise. Because we need to know what the human beings who are executing the operation are going to need. Right? And maybe the technology performs great, but it's just too challenging for the human beings to integrate up with the technology, like them to find the spot on the beach. Maybe your little sneaky mini sub is so sneaky that the guys can never find it. Right? Good job. You snuck up on the beach. Dudes can't find it.
Good camouflage.
I could just see something like that happen. So I talked about it in the brief. I'm a big advocate of setting up the Petri dish first and then testing the applications.
Yeah. So I mean, the U.S. is, we've been at war for hundreds of years with somebody, right? Mm-hmm. Why can't we just do that?
And for listeners out there who didn't get to see the presentation, I think it's a great book, Christian Brost's book, The Kill Chain. I think it's a nice one to read to understand like the government innovation acquisition structure and why it's set up how it is. And not to really, I'm not throwing rocks to anybody, just understand the realistic environment you're working with and how our traditional U.S. military innovation acquisition is really, and this is Christian, I'm taking Christian's ideas as they're not mine, that it's so platform centric that it leaves out the human centric side. And I do know that this year, because I'm a huge nerd, I do know that they're rewriting the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, quite a bit, and they're changing some of the things. I think that's a great step. But I feel like we could use some of those Ukraine people are dying wartime powers, again, just like Secretary Hegseth did with some of the drone technology. And we could make alternate channels of like, the OTAs, the transactional authority stuff. And we as the United States government could make a decision to, yes, have our federal acquisition pipeline for some stuff. Congress could come in and set a big chunk of money aside and say, hey, ADS Solic, I want you to innovate. And here's the money I want you to do it with. And here's some guidelines I want you to do. And I'm sure I'll get a text message from somebody at the Solic's office that's going to tell me immediately how not easy that is. Fine, I get it. If we could set up some sort of alternate funding and alternate testing programmatic way to get ahead of it, to war game stuff out. I guess I'm not answering your question great. I think right now, Dennis, the reason we can't do it is because we do have the checks and balances of being a constitutional republic, which are a very good thing. But to innovate for wartime, I believe that our elected officials could set an alternate path of funding and we work for them to mandate and give us the authorities and the funding to innovate in a way outside of our traditional acquisition chain that's there to protect the American public. But for this sort of innovation and technology, we could make a couple one-time, get out of jail free card. Yeah.
I think even on just the corporate side of things, right? Innovating is expensive. Testing is expensive. Failure is expensive. You would think that the company would be, you've done consulting. I've done consulting for companies. And it's a little scary when they're building something for pre-hospital environment and they have absolutely no idea what the hell they're talking about because they read a book, or their friend who was an EMT, or their friend who was a colonel told them, hey, this is what happens. And they've built like multi-million-dollar things around what this one dude said one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they had access to like, hey, we'll put on an event. Look at frickin' Soft Week. That entire thing is paid for by industry. Why do they do that? Right? Because it's worth it. That's why.
Because it's worth it. Yeah. And right, I have consulted. I'm working with one company I love right now. They have a 2-star general that works with them, and fantastic guy, understands acquisition very well. I have to come in and be like, I wouldn't use it. I want this. Right. That's just me, the guy with my knees in the dirt. I think the U.S. government right now, like, R&D gets sucked up by industry. And I hear this a lot of times. People say like, hey, the R&D, that's the industries. They're the ones who are going to make the big money. They're the ones who have to pay for R&D. Again, I would retort with that and say, they're not just going to eat that R&D money. Like, the corporation isn't just losing money. That's not how they do business. They're passing that cost on to us. So if we could find a better way to provide them feedback, and I think, again, I'm not throwing rocks. I think there's lots of dedicated people out there. There's a myriad of different units that are trying to innovate to help the warfighters at all times. And they are doing their heroes going in every day trying. If we could, and I see this with companies all the time, they just can't get the access, right? They read a book, they read an AAR, they watch a video. I can't tell you how many times I've taken an engineer out to a training site where they thought it was going to be a waste of time, and they came back with, 20 pages of notes and their eyes wide open of now they actually have the context. If I can get off on a small tangent on context. So I have this crazy theory of, and this is all my personal, so you can beat me up, is good decision-making is 3 things, right? It's intelligence, right? How smart you are, your knowledge, what you know about the subject, and the context to apply both of those things. And my example of how context is so important is when they were first building the railroads here in the United States, right? It was a race to get across the country. So there were a couple different companies, and I could look it up and probably narrow it down to who it was. But the story goes that they were using the railroad to ferry supplies to the front of the construction as fast as they could to build it faster. They didn't really have any passengers or anything. So they'd be screaming down the track at like hundreds of miles per hour, or probably it's a steam engine, let's say.
Dozens, yes.
Yeah. Hundreds of miles an hour to get supplies there. And one of the companies adjusted their tactics because they realized they could save time. One of the companies slowed down to going just twice as fast as a horse-drawn carriage. To twice as fast as a horse-drawn carriage, and was actually to get supplies there faster. And why is that? It's because the other company kept getting in accidents because people would stand out on the tracks, or someone would walk out on the tracks, or there'd be an animal and they'd get in like this accident, and it would hold them up for days and days and days, then clear the tracks, because people would legitimately get out on the tracks. And these were super smart people with lots of knowledge of their environment, and be like, what is this thing with smoke coming out of it that's coming down? It's getting really big, really fast. And they didn't have the context because they'd never seen anything move that fast in their entire life to understand the danger they were in. So a super smart, intelligent person would stand there on the railroad tracks and get hit square in the face with a steaming locomotive. So every time you make a decision without the context to imply your knowledge or intelligence, you're running the risk of getting hit square in the face by a locomotive. And I think about that because you get those engineers that come out and they're super smart guys and they just don't have the context. And I think that's where it's really hard to give them the access to that context. And it's where a lot of the innovation doesn't necessarily get skewed, gets wasteful and bloated.
I think because they don't have the time to get, the knowledge, the experience, the context of things, intelligence, knowledge, context. They don't have the time. Like, they put all their brain power in one avenue that is just different, right? But if you're able to see, then you can learn and you can start to understand. Like, they don't need to throw on kit and go do an operation. They need to here, let's watch a pretend one and see.
Yeah. And even as an advisor, it's so hard to give your opinion on that in words. And because you have to tell people all the time, well, trust me, this is how it's going to go down. And it just doesn't hold that much weight. It really doesn't. And you try to communicate as best you can. I think sometimes videos, there is the learning of watch the video of this. This is how. Training events are really where it's at. Every time you can get someone out to an actual range or an exercise. And I know they're doing that now. I know as I was leaving, a lot of the exercises now have some innovation parts built into them. I think is very good. And I'd like to see more of that. We spend a ton of money on these exercises. Why not kick the tires on some new innovation while we're out there and give real feedback? Oh, why can't we innovate in the U.S. military? Just another one. It's our culture of lying. It's the culture of lying. I think this has been covered extensively in many, many journal articles. It's very hard for us to honestly report. You can't even report it on a social and we call it on a fit rep or an NCOR. I can't be hey, this kid's performing okay, but just needs a little more mentorship. Even if that's the truth, I can't write that. Fit reps aren't AARs. Can I be really brutal in an AAR? I can try. I mean, I think I'll give credit where credit is due. I think my Ranger brothers are fantastic at this. They do a really good job of capturing their failures and being honest about it. And I watch them do it in all the time and applaud them. I think the Rangers do a fantastic job of that. But I think the U.S. military, it's hard for us to we spent, $4.2 million in integrating this new hydrofoil device into Cobra Gold, and it was an absolute shit show. How do you report that?
Yeah. I mean, because that's what's used for your promotion. Nobody actually, very rarely do they talk to you or talk to people that know you or have been over you. They just read the report.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that what you have written about you, that's what they're using.
Yeah. Promotion boards, yeah. People are trying now. There's lots of, but yeah, I give credit where credit is due. Of course, we have challenges. Still happy to be on the team. I think it's the best team ever.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think we're harming the future us's by not just saying the truth. At least how we see it, right? At least how we see it. So, there's problems with, or there's not problems, there's difficulties innovating in necessarily the right direction, right? There's always going to be something that wasn't quite right about it. That's always. But you have another problem of just the dudes trying to train for whatever operation will come up in the future, of being being as prepared as they should be, right? We're not doing operations technically right now. Technically. So we don't have that, the walker's dip. The experience goes away because they're done. The new comes in who haven't had the chance to learn those lessons. Hopefully somebody was smart enough to write it down before they left. And so the younger generation coming in, they don't have the operational experience because they were forced to now prepare for an operation that nobody necessarily imagined going forward. I guess, how do you span that? How do you span that walker's dip so we can keep mortality as low as possible?
Yeah, I think I have a personal, the walker dip, I think about it all the time. And at the end of my career, I was pretty, I was trying to take active steps. And one of the things that I think, and it kind of leads into, we're here speaking on the PFC podcast, right? I think it's a great thing that we look at how do we deal with casualty response? Not just because I want to do my absolute best job in a casualty response. I believe that if I can train my service members on how to deal with a casualty response, which is a super chaotic, difficult, and empirically measurable operation, that I can build their knowledge and context and their experience for dealing with other operations. If I can figure out how to, in an unconventional or irregular warfare way, deal with a casualty from the hinterland to the ocean, then I can probably have a lot of experience on how to get from the ocean to the hinterland to just place some sensors. I would say a less complex operation. So if I train in the most complex operation, that I then have a lot of medical data that I could really empirically measure success or failure from, I can do a great job of eliminating that walker dip because, I can write everything down. I can capture it all. But what the next generation of service members are going to need is they need the adult learning model. They need the experiential learning. And that's why I like casualty response in medicine as an overall training. At the end of my NSW career, I set up a program with my NSW medics where they were going out as paramedics, just supporting some of the Department of Homeland Security operations locally in San Diego. And were they authorized to participate in the operation? Heck no. Nope, not at all. Were they going to go anywhere farther than they were going to be back in the cold zone? That's it. But they were going to be out there experiencing the catecholamines, seeing the guys setting up to Third Department of Homeland Security operation, thinking about what are they going to do if someone gets brought back? That experience was still, very, very beneficial for those guys just to be involved with a, I quote, real world operation that wasn't training. It tastes different. It smells different. So I'm a big advocate of yes, casualty response training. I think that a lot of our units should be out helping with some sort of disaster humanitarian relief. And I hear people say that, that's not the U.S. military's mission. I agree. It's not our mission, but it's a really great way for us to contribute to the greater good and get fantastic training and professional development for our service members before they're in this first 6 months of conflict. So I think going out and training casualty response and again, take the medical side away. I was a SEAL platoon chief also, and I developed my young officers. If I have a young tactical officer that has to get in there and deal with a casualty response and that chaotic environment, I'm developing his communication skills. I'm developing his delegation skills. I'm developing his situational awareness that has a very measurable, we can do so many target assaults and I can have instructors come in and they can tear him up. But I can also do that in a casualty response with a measurable metric of success, right? Again, credit to my Rangers. I think the Rangers do a great job. So one of them is going to correct me, but they have like a professional development course for their junior officers where there's an entire week or 2 weeks devoted to casualty response. Genius. What a great way to develop young officers.
If you practice it, it's not so scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And just see those guys professionally developed very well, right? They're on the radio doing great things all the time. And I think we have a section in our junior officer course in SW too, where we do some, but to be very honest, I think the Rangers do it a little bit more robust and well.
Yeah, no, they definitely do, which is, I mean, they're famous for taking potentially survivable death to zero, or at least very near zero.
Yeah. Yeah. Ranger first responders. Yeah. They really, guys, they led the way on this one. And I appreciate all their lessons learned, and I'm happy that I get them from them.
So there's also another rub of it's difficult to find experience, to get time, to get money, to get resources, to train, right? To get that experience. I mean, that's a tale as old as time in the military, is being able to get time for training when you could be, sitting around cleaning your weapons. But now we have another rub of a technology company, a thing that is outside of that influence, that experience, bringing in their new toy, which it's like winning a prize. Like, oh, we bought a new thing. And now you have to integrate that new thing, which has its own capabilities and limitations, into this SOP building, right? Mm-hmm. But the technology changes faster than my ability to build SOPs. How do I reconcile these things?
Yeah, or the government innovation process. A lot of great people are talking about this. And if you spend enough time in special operations, especially when you were a junior guy, you got grabbed to go test some stuff at Fort Huachuca, right? And they're like, hey, you go wear this stuff around and walk around and tell me what you think about it, right? You're like, what? 2 weeks Fort Huachuca? Like, what the? Everybody's been caught at that at some point, right? Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's terrible. And then the question always is like, okay, how do I use this now? Right? ATAC, there's a great example. ATAC at first, guys that took a little while for people to get used to it, right? It took a lot of hard work on changing ATAC up and getting things dialed into exactly what we needed. It took a little while to retrain junior officers that would get in ATAC world and be walking around playing a video game, looking down at their chest, right? It just takes time to integrate that in. And by the time it gets integrated in, sometimes commercial off the shelf has beat you out of the gate, right? Drones are a classic example. Oh man, you might know what it's called, Dennis. I'd researched it before. Is it the Valor network that the Ukraine uses? The Ukraine has a network for drone application they use. It's a program where the units are awarded points for so much operational success, which allows the commanders to focus operational success. So they also, like, if they say they want this many artillery units killed that week, they give more points for the artillery units. And they say, no, we want personnel this week, and more points are delineated. But then it also shows who, like the drone units that are doing the best, they get these points and they can turn around and use those points to spend it on the cables, the drones, the drone accessories that they want. And it kind of cuts out the middleman. I think that, look, not a fully formed thought. I think that program is super interesting, and I'd love to deep dive into how we could maybe apply that in not a 6 months of conflict, all our buddies are getting killed, we have to necessity figure this out. Is there a way that we could set that up in a training environment here in the States where the the units that accomplish the mission better than anybody else are delineated points. And we say, hey, you're going to go back and do this mission again. Spend these points on the gear that you think would make you better. Right. So they're getting to vote with their operational success. I feel like that can be set up.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be set up. I mean, talking about drones, like, have you seen a drone race before? Yeah. You know, they've adapted to doing that, right? It's just the nature of the beast. Have a drone race for what other mission you want them to do, and people will adapt and overcome because everybody loves winning.
Yeah. And to give credit where credit due, I think Ragged Edge is doing some pretty awesome stuff right now. I haven't talked to those guys in a while, but they do some pretty, I mean, there's some great dudes out there, Paul and the boys. They're doing some stuff where, and I think they're letting their students integrate in technology where they see it fits, right? Which is creating a great petri dish for, do we really need this, right? Because that's always my question. I mean, you're probably the same thing. How many times in your career were you handed a piece of kit and they're like, I don't know if I really want to carry this. Does it really make my life better?
MC4?
You know?
Do you remember that?
With the MC4? Was it?
Yeah. It was like the laptops that you could write up all your patient reports on it.
Yeah, and then it had like a little ruggedized USB that I could then put on my patient. I remember the MC4 now, yeah. The dock in the box. Yeah, a bunch of those were
awesome.
Rough.
You know what it actually got used for? Not that. That's for sure.
No, yeah. I remember one time trying, because I remember they were selling me on it because it had the all my literature on it, right? It had like all these different reference material that I could carry with me on deployment. And I'm sitting there like trying to access and read it. And it's so small. I'm like, I'm just going to go grab the book. I just want the book. Yeah. The MC4 was a good one. I'm trying to think of other really, I don't want to call anybody out, swings and misses.
I mean, there's like a million freaking tourniquets, thousands of different chest seals. Like, it's just gone on and on and on and on and on. But yeah, they would, here's a piece of gear. It says it's medical, so I'm handing it to you. No training, no real training. Like, hey, there's a YouTube video. Go find it.
I did find that a couple times.
Yeah.
No real training.
And now integrate this into your patient care while deployed, with limited internet access, with all the things that were supposed to be built in, you don't have.
Ooh, there's another side too, innovation that I'll tell a fun story about. I think it's also like commanders' context and understanding. I've seen this a couple times with, I have my very smart junior guys who are out there really trying to think about how to do their job better, and they have a technology they think they should have, right? And trying to communicate that to commanders. And again, I'm a big Jocko Willink fan and love the man, and he helped me out a ton in my career, and the things he taught me about subordinates and communicating have been a great lesson learned, right? So we don't always necessarily communicate the best. I have a personal experience one time that I think illustrates this of how we need to communicate to our commanders. We need to have a path, a venue that we can have our junior guys who maybe aren't the best communicators at times, right? They maybe aren't the guy that you want briefing the 2-star about what they need, but we need to get their thoughts up there in a way. So maybe we could, I was going to NSW looking to spend some money on ultrasounds, right? This is right when point of care ultrasound was pretty, I took one with me into Yemen in 2013. I'm just saying, I got on the ultrasound boat early. I was like, this is going to change things. And I'm trying to communicate to one of my commanders, and I'd written up a nice little white paper on why ultrasound and why we should do this. And it was too much. I realized later that I didn't communicate right up front of why we needed it. I gave him too much information, and he looks at it and it's like a little too much for him I should have done an executive summary, right? And he looks at it and he's like, damn it, Noel, I don't have time for this. Why am I going to spend $120,000 on ultrasounds? Is it because we're getting girls in the force and we might have people who are pregnant on deployment? And I had this beautifully written white paper that I know he hadn't read all of it. I'm like, damn it, I just did a really bad job communicating to my commanders of why I needed this money. Luckily I was mature enough in my career to understand that was my fault, right? Like, okay, I screwed that up. It's not just that my commander's kind of being a dummy, which he was kind of being a dummy, but that was my fault. In communicating that, I think that we don't do a great job of getting those lessons up to commanders and communicating to them. Like, there should be a great venue of like, hey man, there are, give credit where credit is due. There are like a bunch of great young PJs who are out working on this one problem, and they've figured out this different load lift system, and we want to get it through and get it tested and approved by, I can't remember what the nav air of the Air Force is, but we want to get it approved by the Airworthiness Command. How do we expedite that? I think a system for that would be great too, of like, let our junior guys innovate in a more effective communicative manner too. And get the commanders buy-in of, what were we looking at buying the other day? Something we were looking at buying that was, I know the guys have gone to, that's a bad example. Other than the portable ultrasounds, EMMAs, right? Writing up a good paper of EMMAs of, is this $800, I think that's what an EMMA is this $800 piece of equipment really something that's worthwhile? It took a long time for us to convince NSW with writing ODRs and getting the paperwork through. Man, I wish that could have been a much simpler process of like, because I do believe that every NSW medic should be carrying an EMMA.
Yeah. For airway management, I mean, there's lots of stuff if you know how to do it. And I think that's part of the problem is, you see the EMMA, you're like, that sounds really freaking cool. I want one. What can you do with it? Science. And they go to a school and they're like, hey, this is a gold standard for airway management and confirmation. And let's say that's about as far as they go. Then, young SEAL, Ranger, etc., whomever, because this is new technology, says, well, this is the gold standard. Like, why?
Yeah.
Damn. Like,
it's the training component.
Look at the picture.
It's on us. It's a part of the thing.
Yeah. If there was a way that, let's just stick on the medic side of things. They all were, I won't say all of them, but at least a select few were able to gather this information and then codify it into a document that, and since I would guess they're the older dudes, they know how to communicate better and push that forward. Like, that should be a fairly routine thing. And it would reduce the amount of, that looks cool, I want one.
Yeah, I mean, sign me up for that job right now. I'll take it.
Yeah, I think it's called the SEMA.
I'm in. Yeah. Oh man, those SEMA guys. I'm not going to beat those dudes up at all because they do a lot of work.
Some do.
That's a tough job. It's a tough job. Yeah, and sometimes in like for NSW, we really are SEMAs, those poor guys, because our SEMAs come from outside of the community, right? And I worked with a great one at Group 1, so I had a fantastic SEMA who was just awesome. Christian's dipped in gold, but they come from outside because they're playing catch up for 8 months, trying to figure out what's what and who's who, and then all of a sudden, and they're making these decisions, and it might just be too much work for one person.
I guess without dipping into Navy politics here, but That makes zero sense. That makes zero sense to me why you would get somebody from outside a community, which is really specific,
Very
especially
specific, yeah.
especially on the Navy side, to now be the senior medical advisor. You know what I mean? Like, why don't you just appoint a doc?
Well, I think, and to give credit, I think that those guys filled a gap. So I don't think it was necessarily like NSW needed the leadership on many levels and not just on the tactical medical level, right? We needed it on like the force medical protection. And the guys they have come in and do a fantastic job. Couldn't do it without them. Where I think NSW, where I like the relationship that we had is we set up the TAC med cells where we had a senior SEAL chief who was a SEAL chief medic who was in there who had, the operational context, the time being a medic. And you set as the partner of this SEMA, who was the force SEMA, and you would help and assist with all the tactical stuff. So we would fill the gap of that really hard to produce esoteric. What is it like being a SEAL medic swimming blood across the beach? The SEMA has a huge job. He's doing lots of stuff. And he gets that esoteric tactical question. Let me reach down to my expert. He's going to help guide and shape me. But then I can still have my SEAL chief out there training majority of the time, passing on to the next generation. So I say, while on surface, it doesn't necessarily make sense. And I agree, I still have some issues with it. But the functionality of making sure NSW still links with their component, which is Big Navy, it's an important teamwork step to have. And again, I'm a big teamwork. I think medicine is a fucking team sport. And the minute you don't practice medicine as a team sport, it's a bad idea, right? Do I want my tactical guy whose knees are in the dirt making every decision? No. I want him at sometimes looking to his disease non-battle injury expert, which for us in the Navy would be our surface force independent duty corpsman, and going, hey man, I'm treating tinea versicolor. Am I doing this right? Does my soap note look right? Okay, thanks. Right? So teamwork style. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily make sense for NSW. I think NSW has some challenges and still going through some growing pains, but it's where they're at right now. Yeah, I think an adjunct out of the SEMA's office, and I'm sure Jeremy would correct me, like a person who deals with innovation out of the SEMA's office, I think would be a good GS hire, right? So then they're not a contractor. They have no vested interest. You can have a person that's their sole job is to gather and screen that information and then present it to the SEMA in an organized fashion. Like, hey boss, this is what the dudes out there saying. This is what I got. What do you want me to do with it?
We're pushing close to an hour. I'm going to make you king for a day. You get to make 3 total changes to prepare the next generation for maritime IW. What would they be and why?
Like what I talked about, that I would set up a maritime, or I would do it just irregular warfare medicine center of excellence out of Stennis, Mississippi. The space center there, where NSW already has some infrastructure with our advanced training command and their awesome relationship with NOLA EMS, the NAV ski yachts, the Naval Small Boat Instruction and Technical Training Center. I think I got that right. Who already does kind of a security forces FID type small boat instruction. Huge commercial commercial fishing fleet, huge gas and oil platform fleet, and create a space and a staffed place for people to do the training and testing for maritime IW. and again, fund that. So I'd create the environment. I would come down as to the SOCOM components and ask them to give me joint service members from all flavors, from like special operations logistics guys to TAC Ps to SEALs to Green Berets, to do exercises. And then it's a fourth. I have to add a fourth on. So I'd want to create the environment. I'd want to joint staff it. I'd want to create a robust red cell infrastructure of seasoned operators that are out there independently trying to put the friction of enemy interdiction on these exercises, independent, so they can do whatever they want to try and beat the service members, so we can get a real testing, and then have a 100% completely honest reporting structure built into all those exercises to illuminate all the friction, all the gaps, and all the innovational opportunities.
Perfect. Well, awesome, Noel. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dennis. It was lots of fun. I love the conversation before. Again, love everything you do. Hopefully I'm back at the schoolhouse soon. I know you're still in North Carolina, right? Yeah. So we'll have to grab a beer next time I'm in town. All right, man. Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's it for today's podcast. Make sure to go to our website, www.prolongedfieldcare.org. Check out our free downloads and a ton of other helpful information. Grab a bag of our fresh roasted PFC coffee, links in the description below, and stay on the bleeding edge of combat and austere medicine. This is Dennis for the PFC Podcast, out.